7.5. We'll move on to consideration of Community Development Department repayment plan and proposed oversight strategies. 7.5, Community Development Director. Now you're back.
We're done.
We didn't need you.
We were joking. We do need you
For the 7.2.
for the 7.2.
He's good. He's good for now.
That will be.
I know, I just thought we had somebody waiting for that.
That gentleman's waiting for this specific.
Yeah,
Oh.
he is.
I thought that his was the repayment. I can't get rid of this darn download. I somehow hit the download button and I can't get rid of it. Where?
There's no escape. Apple.
I've tried a number of different things. It's just stuck there. It's been stuck there for a while. Oh well, that's okay. I tried to close it. I can read over it, around it. Yeah. Okay. Okay, thank you.
Good morning. Mireya Turner, Community Development. Excuse me. Elise is catching. Community Development Director. The item you have before you today stems from the discussion we had at the last meeting regarding a request for a loan for the Community Development Department. The board had questions that in the last couple weeks we have worked diligently to find answers. So the presentation that you have before you today is a result of considerable work on behalf of the staff reviewing budget years, not just this past, but going back to 2020, 2021. Community development has a shared vision, which I have shared with this board and with the community at large. But what I haven't talked about was that we share core values as well. One of which being transparency, the other being a recognition of the high value of maintaining public trust. And so I think you'll find that the presentation that we have today is consistent with those core values. I know that the board did not appoint me because I'm a government budget wizard, but what you did do was appoint me to uphold the shared trust that we have of the value of public trust. I will turn this over to our Deputy Administrator to present, but at first I wanted to address the information that's been swirling around in the media since our last meeting, because I think it's really important to note that in order to be consistent with our core value of transparency, we be accurate, as thorough, and as well researched as possible. And so, regrettably, we were unable to answer all of the questions that were posed within the timeline that is within the media, which is a quick turnaround, because we were working to make sure that what we present for you at this requested board item is as thorough, as vetted, and as accurate as possible. And so we do regret that we were unable to work with the timeline with the media like we usually do, because it is important and they are a vital part of maintaining that public trust. But I think that the questions that were being sought at that time will be answered today. I will turn this over to Deputy Administrator Shannon Walker-Smith. We also have our accountant available on Zoom in case there are questions that you have that we need to bring him in on. Thank you.
Good morning, Board. Hoping that this presentation will answer a lot of the questions that were posed to us post the November 18th meeting where we presented on this item previously. We've done significant analysis of building safety division revenue, permit data, quite a lot of data, and we kept having more and more questions. So we ended up analyzing data back to the 21-22 fiscal year. And what we found is although revenue is starting to trend down slightly, revenue projections are not the source of this problem. What the source of this problem is a slow and steady trend of reserve spending, which started in 21-22. And most of that is due to contributions to code and planning department operations that were began in 22-23, when building reserves had gotten significantly high up to the $900,000 range. And so community development was directed to start spending down those reserves as was appropriate at the time. Unfortunately, that spending continued. So this is kind of a summary document. We do think we can recover and rebuild this budget within a 3-year period, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that at the end of this presentation. So just to answer some of those questions about what kind of fund this is and what kind of rules there are governing it, the Building Safety Division is a special revenue fund as defined by the state. And the goal of a fund like that is to isolate specific revenues, usually because they come through a fee or a grant, so that there's transparency and accountability back to the public about the use of those funds, so that revenues in special revenue funds are legally restricted and committed to specific purpose. So they must be spent on the intended purpose of the building safety and community development operations. Fees, of course, are developed and adopted through your body, through the master fee schedule, but are mostly built on the ICC's building valuation table. So there's not a ton of room and flexibility for the department to determine what kind of fees, although it's something that hasn't been analyzed in quite some time to my understanding, and it's something, again, at the end of the presentation we can talk about as a next step. This is a citation that shows that all community development operations, these revenue funds are dedicated towards, are legally appropriate to be used. It's just that the building reserve should have been preserved more greatly for building operations than the services of the other divisions, but that we weren't doing anything inappropriate when we made those contributions to the other divisions. And this basically just talks about the state code that outlines the jurisdiction's responsibility towards the community development department, saying how it may collect fees in order to support services, but that generally the county is responsible for making sure that the funds are available for services provided by the department. So we started with looking at a lot of 25-26 numbers in comparison to 24-25, and we looked at permit numbers, permit categories. We were doing comparisons, a little bit apples and oranges, because we've transitioned from Acela to OpenGov over the 24-25 to 25-26 year. So categories of permits and things have changed in our data system. So it was not an exact comparison across. And we also looked at revenue accumulation from, rates last year and this year, and then obviously previous years, which you're going to see on this slide coming up. And we just found no significant deviations of note in this particular year, and that's what led us to discover that this problem goes back a little bit farther. So now we're going to look at some data. This slide shows what we projected revenue would be when we submitted budgets, and then what the actuals of revenue ended up being over multiple years. So you can see that our projections were pretty accurate until last year, where revenues did take a little bit of a decline, and quite a bit of reserve spending happened at the end of last fiscal year because of an unexpected kind of decline in revenue. But other than that, the department has been projecting revenue fairly accurately over a period of time. This slide shows how much of our budget is basically locked up in salaries and other obligated expenses, and those obligated expenses are mostly things that are assigned to us as part of the county allocation for insurance, admin services, IT services, and those other obligations that typically do come out of the budget at the beginning of the fiscal year, making it such that the building division in particular is particularly dependent on their reserves in order to kind of ride the wave of the expenses outpacing the revenue generation. In most years, this is a trend that we can see now, that the reserves have been necessary in order to keep the building division solvent during that time. And with the spend down in reserves, that's created this cash flow issue. But this slide is mostly there to demonstrate that we have really actually very little flexibility in course correction once we notice that there's a challenge happening in the budget, which we did know reserves were spending down at a rate that was unsustainable. But it's very difficult when most of the budget revenue is locked up in salaries and other obligated expenses. It makes it very difficult for us year to year to kind of make these shifts towards more fiscal health. This really starts to point out when things started to need course correction but didn't get it. So reserves were going up, peaking in at the beginning of 22-23 with I think a little over $900,000 in reserves. And so at that point, community development began to spend down reserves, and the way that they mostly did that was through this increase in contributions, as I mentioned before, to the planning and code enforcement divisions. And so then you see the lines crossing here in 23-24, which would have been a good time for us to start looking at course corrections, but unfortunately that did not happen. And so contribution kind of leveled out here, and reserve spending, reserves continued to decrease. And then this graph shows kind of all four things, the reserve and the expenses again, and then also, the reserves and the contributions again down here, showing basically that same graph line, but also revenue and expenses up here. So you can see that there's these couple of crossing points that we should have strategized around a better way to spend down revenues, maybe more in one-time services and things like that, rather than dedicating those contributions to staff positions that made it such that we couldn't really change position very quickly. So in terms of our plan and moving forward, immediately we have a pause on all intra-departmental funding, so no more contributions from building to code and planning beginning this entire fiscal year, so you won't see any of those contributions in 25-26. We've ceased all non-vital spending and hiring. We're planning to schedule monthly meetings with admin to check in and continue to strategize around these issues. And we have all purchases being approved by admin currently. Planning to make regular reports to the board as we work towards repayment, and we could do that as often as you prefer, but at least twice a year. And then this is kind of the beginning of our ask that we would like to extend the period of time over which this loan would be repaid to 3 years. And the reason for that is because we have a responsibility to also start rebuilding reserves so that we don't end up back at the beginning of next fiscal year asking for cash again. We need to have some reserves available at the beginning of the year. So this is our plan to try to take a balanced approach to both rebuilding reserves and repaying the loan. And then beyond immediately, additional plans that we have for mid-year and beyond are our mid-year building safety budget will reflect the change of no contributions to planning and code, which is going to go a long way, kind of leveling out the building division. Code and planning will also need major mid-year budget revisions, which is going to spur the conversation about some additional general fund contributions to cover that difference. We're of course focusing on being frugal, reevaluating our priorities, looking at all non-revenue generating activities to see where they fall on the priority list, while continuing to provide quality services to the community. And we have a constant focus and will continue and double down our efforts on cost recovery in the other divisions, as well as grant funding that becomes available. And then just in next steps and looking kind of for direction from your board today, we realize that we have some additional kind of more substantial options we can look at to help this department recover to a really healthy, robust budget. And so those options for your consideration are looking at fees through a robust fee analysis. As I mentioned, hasn't been done for the building division for a bit, and but could be done for all three divisions. But it could, potentially result in fee increases, which we know, there's the community has a lot of input about. Whether or not you want us to be looking at staff levels and efficiency analysis, and whether or not we should be reconsidering just department priorities for kind of becoming a sleeker department without as much community engagement and some of the things that we do that are not cost recoverable. That is what I have, Director.
Thank you. And before we go on to the conversation, I just want the board to recognize that the review that the staff has done has shown me that my error in this, as I'm the department head, was to take on the direction of spending down the reserves without a proper full circle understanding of where that stops and like the long-term use of those reserves. So I do apologize for that. And we will hand it back to the board in case you have any questions.
Supervisor Sabatier?
Do I have to be first? Thank you very much for the presentation. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I feel like a lot of this is already kind of what was stated in the past of being frugal, having hiring freezes. I think the most important section that we're here is the 1 through 3, is what are the next steps. And I feel very skeptical, I guess, maybe, that this board will be the best participant to tell you specifically what to do. We're not the experts in the field. And I would like to see more of those 3 options. How do they align in options for the board to look at, which has potential impacts on staffing, which has potential impacts on budgets, and then with those options laid out in front of us of at least 2 separate options, it would be nice if we can get 3, which one do we want to move with and which one do we want to support, rather than giving you answers to 1, 2, and 3, which may not result in the outcomes that we're looking for. I'll talk specifically, so I'm hoping that CDD can meet with admin and look at the budget and look at the staffing and look at these 3 questions and come back with some options for us. Because I think I watched the video from last time, and I think I need to do better. We need to do better in being very clear. We asked about oversight. And I don't know that we were very direct that what I'm asking, I think, is what we were asking before, which is admin and CDD come back with some options. And I'm feeling like that's not specifically what I was looking for, but maybe I could have done better in communicating that. So I apologize. But that's what I would like to see, is some robust options for us to choose from, not criteria for us to provide to you, because that could be dangerous and go in the wrong direction. I don't want to be misleading with anything. When it comes to the loan, I would also like to see, what does a 1-year repayment look like? What does a 3-year repayment look like? And I prefer not going any longer, but what would it take to do that? Rather than just asking for 3 years. Because my concern with the loan, and it's not, we now have 2 loans that we have, is anything that we loan out is coming out of our general fund reserves. And our general fund reserves, we get a quarterly report of the great investment that we're making, where we're creating more money from those reserves, and we're losing that. And right now wrong term, we are providing support in loans, which takes away from our taxpayers' dollars to be invested and create more dollars to go back into services into our community. And so the longer the loan is, the more we lose out on those opportunities. And so that's why I'm looking for, bring us back the professional and expert options of what really should be looked at, rather than our opinion of what we should be looking at, and what kind of different year what kind of year options do we have for a 1-year repayment, 2-year repayment, 3-year repayment, rather than just a 3-year repayment? Because again, it's a loss to the potential revenues that we are making from the great investments that we've been doing lately. So I think that's pretty much my comments for today.
Thank you. With the new OpenGov system, we are in a much better position to do our cost recovery and fees analysis. So we're confident that will help us to prepare information to come back to you with robust fees and cost recovery analysis. Additionally, in preparation for this meeting, we have had a number of meetings with admin that have been productive and helpful, and we were able to have the types of discussions that we don't usually get to have when we're preparing a budget, because they're busy with everybody's budgets, and so we get a little bit of time. So I'm confident that continuing meetings with admin will be productive.
And I apologize, Chair. I forgot one main thing. I just had a strange conversation out there. I won't name names, but they're thankful that since OpenGov, it seems to be cheaper to go upstairs and ask for the same thing they used to ask. So I'm wondering if you can maybe look at doing an audit to ensure OpenGov was properly activated with the right fees, because maybe that's part of the problem, is this new OpenGov, which is fairly new, which would kind of coincide with the term that we're looking at, and maybe you're not collecting the fees you should be collecting. I don't know. I don't want to increase them, but at the same time, if it was improperly inputted in the software, then that could also be a shortfall in the revenues, which would explain some of the issues.
We did double check for accuracy to the master fee schedule, but we will go back and take another look. Thank you.
Supervisor Pyska.
Yeah, I appreciate this plan and this background. I do wish it was part of the agenda so that we could have looked at it closely, at least yesterday. I do agree with Supervisor Sabatier. I thought that we were going to be getting a joint presentation with admin. So I think next time when you come back, I would really appreciate that so that we can hear from both sides. I'm glad that you're working together and having these conversations. We have been talking about CDD and the divisions being self-sustaining for a while now. And that just needs to be the ultimate goal right now. And we are adopting our master fee schedule today, so I just have to ask, because I don't see any increases there where they're clearly needed. So what type of, are you getting up to come up here? Or we can come up. I'm just wondering, like, what type of analysis happened to get us to today's fee schedule if we think that it's lower than possibly what's needed?
Well, this is the first that I've heard that it was lower than maybe the master fee schedule, so we're going to double check that. But historically, and even up to the last master fee schedule, the conversation about raising fees specifically for community development services has been one that gives the board pause. Understandably, you're trying to balance development to encourage development while also trying to encourage the sustainability, which is one of our department visions, sustainability for code and planning. What we didn't show you in our slide was 3 years ago, we started looking at other ways to achieve that sustainability, and that's actually why a couple of our positions are in existence and filled today, is to build up that grants program, which has been very successful in code. We have started having the conversations with admin regarding additional ways that we can boost that sustainability for planning. Those are ongoing, but we're not ready to make any moves for today's fee schedule update. I know that admin works on that for a while, so we'll be looking at mid-year and future fee adjustments.
Okay, so, but for now, this joint plan and options for repayment, I think we all need a little bit more solid plan, and I'm wondering, with working with admin, what is the time frame when you can come back and give that to us?
I'll defer to Stephen, so he knows the availability on his side, but our team is amenable to whatever admin wants to work out. And we did do a considerable amount of thinking to get to that 3-year program, so it's kind of just like you're asking us to show our work, which we'd be happy to do.
Yeah, I think we need to see work right now.
Sure.
Stephen?
Stephen Carter, Assistant County Administrative Officer. It would be very difficult to have the kind of plan you're looking for in 1 week, so I would ask for the first or second meeting in January. There is a lot of details that we have that weren't presented here, but I'd like to present it as a whole. Because like one thing you guys need to be very aware of is when we stop or cease the contributions to planning and code, that's a direct 100% hit to general fund that obviously we don't necessarily have. So we need to work out part of that plan at the same time. So I would suggest that we come back with a CDD plan, not just a building plan.
Right, that's what I'm asking for, all of CDD, all the divisions, the interplay between them, and well before mid-year budget.
And I did want to say one more thing. The reason for the 1 to 3 years, admin is on board with more than 1 year. And the reason why is even if they could pay, just for background right now, even though they may unlikely be able to pay by the end of 1 year, every July they'll have a cash flow problem to where they would need a loan of about 2 months worth of salary. So that's why at the same time as paying us back, you need to put a little bit in reserve so that they don't have to come back right away at the beginning of every year asking for more money for a short-term loan.
Yeah, it would be really helpful for us to get visuals of what that looks like.
Correct. We'll do a whole presentation.
Okay, thank you.
Vice Chair, and then Helen, you can go after him.
Yeah, a few comments, starting with the, if we're able to, well, first of all, I'm comfortable with the 3-year repayment because I think, it's important to be able to build reserves while at the same time paying that back. I know we have a resolution right now that says it's supposed to be paid back by June 30th, which is not going to happen, and so I don't know how we deal with that resolution, but I know this is somewhat of a complex budget in that a lot of times, we might be getting fees paid a year or two, before projects actually happen, and then that money, so there's a lot of accounting that goes into keeping track of all that. So it does get complex, and I want to make sure that we're not putting too quick of a deadline on repayment. To me, it's more important to have a good plan and rather than the actual timeline. in looking at, these up here, I do want to be careful with jumping to any, additional fees and stuff with community development, because I think that, like you said, Director, we want to encourage development. We don't want to get too high on fees. So me, that's one of the last things to look at. I think one of the most important things is looking at our staffing levels and efficiency and seeing how we can be more efficient with what we have and potentially save funds there as well. And yeah, I think those are my main comments right now at this point. Thank you.
Supervisor Owen?
Thank you. I'm going to echo much of what all of my colleagues have said, and I'm glad that Brad brought up the increase of fees. I'm not one that wants to increase our fees because I feel that our fees are hindering our community from being able to do things that they want to do. So I'm wondering, as they had mentioned, both Bruno and Jessica, there was, I would like to see all the attachments attached. So not just myself, we can see it here, but there's other people that go through our agenda as well, and they would like to see this as well. So I would like to have the data and the information attached, if possible. And I know not today, but for the future.
Just to make sure I'm clear, at this point, we'd be happy to send the PowerPoint for uploading. The data that we're preparing for the next meeting will all be available publicly.
Okay, perfect. And there was, let me put on my glasses so I can see my notes. So the fees I'm opposed to, I'd like to see what else we can do within. I would like to know, when you bring in your fees, I would also like to see the comparisons, of course, so we would like the community to be able to see them as well.
Comparison of these
You
two.
have, what, on number 1 up there, where you're looking at possibly going
see.
robust. And again, I'm opposed to it, but if you're going to bring something forward, we'd like to have everything right here.
Got it.
So we can see it. I've been a little frustrated in the fact that we had just accepted the budget back in September, and then it was no time at all before we needed the loan, you needed the loan. And then at 1 year, now it's 3 years. So getting things cleaned up and where we have an idea of exactly where we're going, I think is important.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So lastly, I remember, I want to say about a year and a half ago, if not like sooner, I don't remember exactly, but I know in the town halls and even having code enforcement come in and discuss with the ticketing system with OpenGov when it comes to fines. I know that I don't know the amount that's accruing. I know, in my opinion, that it's quite lenient. There's lots of concessions and time more given. And in some instances, even with cannabis. And so I think that could help, if there's a little more stringent and timely fines and ensuring that we collect those might help. That's just an opinion, though. I don't know if you can have some
Thank you.
sort of guidance to that when it comes to the records. Or
To date, we have issued $500,000 in citations and fines. What we will be able to collect, I'd be happy to include that information in the next presentation as well. Also including the shifts that we have made already within the department. We are spending more time identifying unpermitted work, not just for revenue recapturing, but rather also to make sure we're ensuring health and safety standards in our construction in the county. Additionally, but we would be happy to include measures that we have taken to help with sustainability.
And I'm more talking about the side of like code violations, because I drive around with people who just show me, these different code violations, and I know that code has a lot to do around the whole county, and I get it. So I don't know, I just wanted to make sure I stated that so that. at
Thank
least,
you.
Maybe.
One of the priorities of, or the values of the code enforcement process has been to encourage self-abatement.
Right.
But we have also been issuing notices of violations that do come along with citations, and we'd be happy to detail that in the next presentation.
Thank you. Thank you. All right, if there's not anything else, I'll open it up for public
I have
comment.
one more thing. With that, can you show the citations or when people are not complying versus those that were actually given fines? So what we're looking for, I've heard the same
Good
thing.
players. Yeah.
Yes, yes. And the people that are not getting fines that have violated numerous times, that's primarily, I can see a one time without a fine, but if it's continuing and they're not getting fines, that's an issue.
Certainly.
All right, public comment.
Good morning, Chair. Good morning, Board. Tom Lasik. I'm going to speak to you from experience. I used to be an auditor back in the 90s and a compliance auditor for our company. And I want to also thank Director Turner for being very candid, because a lot of times you don't hear that when you have a situation like this. I think what you've been presented is, again, a really good start, but I think you've already also pointed out there's a lot of things that aren't complete here that needs more fleshing out. A couple observations is, and this is, I'm not trying to be snarky or anything like this, but as an auditor, one of the things we would find when we would have situations like this is mistakes this big don't happen by mistake. You actually have to work at making it this bad. And what we mean by that is that you have controls, you have stopgap measures in your processes and in your systems, and something must have happened to prevent that from occurring. As they pointed out, this thing started 3 years ago, and it started going down. Where are the alarms that were set off to say, hey, we're overspending our reserve? Or whatever. Why did it take until less than one payday away to find out you didn't have enough money to make payroll? That doesn't happen by mistake. I know you guys have checks and balances in your process. It's not just the business department or CDD. There should have been some oversight somewhere that should have stepped in and say, hey, we're noticing your budget is going sideways, and stop it before you have to have a loan. I'm not seeing an answer to that question. I think it was pointed out that last meeting, it was highly confident it could be paid back in 1 year. Now we're hearing it's highly confident it can be paid back in 3 years. But we still don't see the roadmap for that. And I think that's going to be important. What is the payment schedule? Where is the money going to come from? And then the other thing is, it was mentioned they knew it was unsustainable. So they knew years ago it was not sustainable, but nothing, what happened? Where was that? And I also want to point out that what Supervisor Pyska mentioned, we need to look at all the CDD, because usually the behaviors aren't just with one department. You know, there was a slip up, and it's not just CDD. There should have been oversight somewhere that stepped in and said, we notice your budget is going sideways. You shouldn't have to wait until it's a crisis. So I think what you're trying to do is on the right direction, but there's more that needs to be done. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. I want to apologize for my earlier faux pas. I didn't have a lot of time to prepare for today. Again, my name's Kevin Boyd. I'm a resident of Kelseyville. And I will say this presentation, comments by the gentleman before me, make it pretty clear that mismanagement is seriously at play in this situation in terms of the funding. I would like to expound upon that a little bit. I do believe that you found out last minute as a strategy to pigeonhole your available options. As somebody who runs a budget, I would know 6 months in advance that I'm going to have a cash flow shortage, especially of this magnitude, because you would just not be hitting your numbers consistently. You would have to run some projection that says you'd have to overperform by some number in order to make it up by a certain time. I can tell you week to week if I'm making payroll 6 months from now. There were some comments in the previous meeting regarding this situation about how they would make the money. A lot of conversation here today is about how they will make the money. The way that they intend to make the money, as far as I can tell, is by extorting taxpayers for supposedly unpermitted work that happened at such a time frame in the past that they have no reasonable way to remediate the issue, especially in a timely fashion. My family is currently being extorted for a permit that happened while I was still in high school back in 2008, 2009 timeframe. There's been 2 changes in ownership of our property in that time. There's no way for me to have documentation to support what happened. And so somebody shows up and gives you a 30-day notice to pay them. My experience with that department has been desperately disorganized. I could not make any progress calling in and trying to figure out what was going on. It was openly antagonistic. I heard this line, "You bought the problem," a lot. As somebody who worked for a Fortune 200 company twice, I can tell you people do not make up those lines on their own. They're coached. And then most recently, I've been harassed by an employee. I've already submitted a formal complaint, but I don't have any expectation anything will be done. We need to look at not just what fees they're collecting, but how they're doing it. There is no way for taxpayers to be held responsible for 30, 20-year-old permits that they could not reasonably have documentation for. It's simply not practical. And it's simply not a good idea in terms of maintaining property values in Lake County. My purchase tripled the assessed value of the property. I am paying a lot more taxes. I believe that there's a nefarious,
If you can wrap up.
I believe that there is a incentive for the county to not have records and then go back after the fact and try and collect on permits. Because now you're locked into a property that's got a higher assessed value, you have no means to adjudicate the issue. If I get a speeding ticket, I get to talk to a judge.
Kevin, if you could wrap up.
We need to take a look at the processes, not just the accounting. The whole thing, top to bottom, has a problem. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Good morning, Casey Marino, Deputy County Administrative Officer. So the Administrative Office relies on departments to accurately project their financial needs to sustain operations during the annual budgeting process. We meet with each department to review their budget and as needed throughout the year. Regular monthly meetings will continue with CDD, and next year's CDD budget will be developed in conjunction with administration. As stated on the PowerPoint, admin staff will have full signature authority and approve all purchases. Admin is dedicated to getting the building division and CDD back to a more financially stable place. It is important to note that the budget and cash balance of a fund are not the same. The budget is a planning document, which projects what revenues will come in and identifies how they are anticipated to be spent. It is balanced when those are expected or planned numbers match. The mid-year budget review identifies areas where adjustments need to be made. We do not want to minimize the severity of this issue. The largest impact has been the significant increase in the amount of transfers from building to code and planning. Code was previously part of the building division, and transfers began increasing when those divisions were split in 2020, 2021. Over the past 3 years, about $1.1 million has been transferred as contributions to those divisions, while just over $1 million was for salaries. Last year, the amount transferred to code nearly doubled. By removing the transfers from building, it creates an increase in the amount of general fund needed for code and planning. We will be working closely with CDD to reduce the amount of general fund support is needed to maintain the balanced budget.
Thank you. Public comment still?
Good morning, Board. Margot Kambara. Thank you for your attention to this serious problem. And thank you for being good stewards of Lake County fiscal resources. Just to add a few suggestions to what previous speakers have commented on, and that is taking a look at the projections for the fiscal year 26 income. So, and forgive me if you already have this in mind, but I would strongly recommend that you ask for a detailed breakdown on what that income is going to include. Does that include the Gwinnett Valley mixed use project? I mean, it's one thing to have projections of what your income is going to be, but is that vaporware? Is that really based in reality? Where is that income? What's the basis for that income projection? As far as oversight, who has oversight over authorizing overtime? Will that come from admin, or will that be from CDD with admin oversight? I don't know. And as a previous speaker asked, what is the oversight mechanism? So CDD's budget didn't go off the rails all by itself. There should be levels of oversight. And it would be helpful to have a postmortem, so we can have lessons learned, not just for CDD, but for other departments in the county, saying, what are the warning signs when a budget is going sideways? And that concludes my comments. Thank you.
Thank you. Supervisor Sabatier, I see your pen up.
Is there any more public comment? I just had it up for.
Oh, okay. All right. If you can unmute on Zoom and state your name for the record, we'll give you 3 minutes.
Hi, Lily Wells, Pillsbury Family Farm. And I just wanted to say that I do recall in 2024 when former Chief Building Inspector Bill Collins, alongside with Director Turner, presented to the board the reason why the county needed to switch from Excelia to OpenGov was to allow the county flexibility in increasing building fees. At the time, it was stated that the fee schedule adopted through Excelia was modeled after the San Mateo County, whose fees and fines are actually lower than what Lake County sought to establish. So it raises an important question. What is the goal of our fee structure? The goal should not be simply maximizing revenue, but establishing fees that are feasible, predictable, and equitable. Fees that the public can reasonably afford while still allowing the county to operate efficiently. Speaking as a cannabis farmer, I can say that the inspection fees have become increasingly unpredictable. Instead of there being a stable set amount that I had signed to during my code for my conditions of approval, the inspection costs continue to rise year after year, and the lack of consistency makes it extremely difficult for small operators like myself to budget, plan, or remain compliant. Stability matters in our county, not just for cannabis, but for all of the regulated industries that thrive within it and for the general public. I also want to encourage the board that you maybe need to take a harder look at your 30-30-30-10 framework and wonder whether your current allocations are truly aligned with community benefit. And particularly, I ask that you consider whether some of CDD enforcement general funds could be reduced, reallocated towards the youth programs and preventative services, and for livable wages for our in-home health care supportive services. The Sheriff's Department already receives the Department of Justice grant funding for similar enforcement.
Chair,
Duplicating that enforcement funding through the departments while underfunding youth programs doesn't strengthen our community long term.
Thank you. If you can unmute.
Good morning, board. My name is Sterling. After listening to this presentation and being a long community member, I would suggest looking into how many people have applied for permits and how hard it is to get the permits, because things are so hard in the county to be able to build. This is the reason why businesses are shutting down, because it's literally impossible with the regulations and stuff. With the general fund, I would look into how many people were hired during the time when they seen that there was a deficit and this was going on. Anybody that has common sense in business, when you are running into knowing that you're not going to be able to do payrolls, or you see that you're going to start running into a deficit, why would you hire new employees? I do agree with most of all the people that did make a comment. I really hope that this board looks into this and looks into that, because these are taxpayers. And, you know, even with businesses, I've been hit with assessments on my property taxes 4 years down the road, 8 years down the road. And it's just constantly adding. And where's my money going at this point? If it's going to them and they're not managing the money correctly, then you guys as a board should probably step in and ask where all these funds are going. Why did you employ more people? How much of that overtime is going to those people, and how much is really going into all of their wages, their benefits, their overtime pays, their sick pays, their holiday pays? Anyway, thank you guys for looking into this.
Thank you. Kyle?
Yeah, thank you. I really do value the board's insight into this. I was curious to Chair Crandall's point. I would be interested to know, as far as the citations or permitting, more or less the citations though, what industries are perhaps extensions or a little bit more leniency in that, if that is the case, because we do have industries that are already kind of benefiting from, you know, lowering or freezing their tax increases that were projection already, you know, we're expecting. And it seems like my concern is certain industries benefiting from more of that leniency with the county. And it seems like if we're struggling with meeting our goals or what we need to maintain our programs, or that would be my concern. And I do agree that my concern as a citizen is that you know, we pay our, you know, these fees for the public good, and if those funds aren't being stewarded in a responsible manner, that's kind of a concern of mine. But I appreciate the board looking into it, and I agree with a lot of the statements that were already previously made. But again, I would be very curious to know industry specifics that might be getting more leniency, if that is the case. Because just as a citizen, I'm just kind of curious to know why that might be, if that were true, the fact. So thank you.
Thank you. Guest.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and Board. Angela Amaral. One suggestion I'd like to make is that maybe considering a threshold limit for reserves, that once it gets to a certain level that it triggers a review. If we have a threshold that needs to be above this, and once it hits that. Another thing I saw on there was that there was an employee review of what the employees are doing. And I think that's, since this is so heavily weighted in salaries, I think that's a wonderful idea. Because I think in some instances, highest paid employees are doing work of other employees that could be work that could be done by aides or extra help employees. And in some cases, you have the highest paid employees doing those jobs. The last thing is, there's talk about, in October, your board heard from Mr. Rickelman regarding the Lake County is exploring potential tools to incentivize housing and commercial projects, which included a consideration of development fee deferrals. So how will that, if the fee deferrals do go into place, how will that affect the revenue for CDD, or will it? Thank you.
Thank you. All right. We'll close public comment and come back to the board. And Supervisor Sabatier, you had your pen up.
Yeah. So our job is to review and consider a budget every single year. Our job is to thoroughly go through that budget. I personally failed to see what we're dealing with today. And I think that anybody who is involved with that should also take a little bit of skin in the game, that rather than looking at who else is to blame. I heard a comment today that it struck a nerve. We need to work as a team to fix this, not try to isolate individuals, or else we're going to create larger problems than we need to deal with at this moment in time. We need to work as a team in order to recuperate. I do want to speak to what a gentleman talked about. I spoke about it last time, and I want to bring it up, and I want to bring Mr. Guintavano into the conversation. I received a white paper from your office, as did CDD, regarding the use of fees for the repayment. I will just state that I disagree with the outcome of that white paper, which says that it can be used to repay. I just don't understand how a developer in March can pay a fee that helps repay for salaries spent in October. That to me makes no sense at all. And I would like to either we speak of that, or we come back when we get more information and a deeper dive in January, which I'm totally fine with coming back in the second week of January. I think we need time to make sure we bring something robust back to the board. But I feel that needs to be a part of the conversation, because I don't know that I actually question our fees in the sense, are they too high? If somebody doing work in March is paying for somebody in October, it just doesn't make sense that the latter 6 months, you're paying for the previous 6 months. You're supposed to be paying for the service and the time spent. That time spent is a complete package. You're paying for the electricity, you're paying for the payroll, but it's a portion of it. It's not a large portion of it. And it's supposed to be an appropriate amount. And we're supposed to be doing our studies when we get to our fee structure, our fee schedule that we create. They don't come out of thin air. So I feel I need to bring that up, because I do still have concerns in the way that we have used our funds, the sense that we've used reserves from building to help pay for planning, completely different projects. I have concerns on that. And I also have concerns in this concept that what we're being offered is to repay still using fees, but to repay for something that has no connection with what people are actually paying for when they come in March or April or May. And so I would like to see if Mr. Guintavano wants to speak to that. I know he's also seen this white paper, or if it's something that we can have a more robust discussion at a later time in January.
Go ahead, Lloyd.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So outside of providing some highlights or summary to that, more preferable option would probably be the latter, which is to make it a part of the discussion, especially since I would anticipate between now and the January date where staff would come back to the board, I anticipate there would be further discussions on what your board deems to be the plan or the direction being given to staff by today. Pursuant to that we could incorporate that in the presentation and discussion for January.
So just one last thing I was thinking of while Supervisor Sabatier was talking is I heard the mention of fees and time, time used. So the time spent on some of the projects by your staff. I wanted to see if we could look at how much work is done outside that normal scope, because I know that is it all hands on deck, like when it comes to, I'll just throw something out there like a PRA. Is there specific people that have to do that and now are taken off of the tasks that are funded tasks, if you will? Just maybe see a count of that type of work that's done that really doesn't, it's just doing the work, but it's not accruing any type of, recouping or anything like that.
Thank you. Staff is already working on compiling a list of the activities that we do perform that are not revenue generating. Mm-hmm. You'll find most of those are in planning, because land use touches so many different outside our agency activities, that we do spend time assisting other agencies, other departments like the Area Planning Council on their, the TAC, I forget the acronym, but, or CEQA for other departments, or working on the housing element, conducting public meetings, things like that that are not revenue generating. We'll have a detailed list for you available as part of the next presentation.
Right.
But that's also part of the reason of compiling that list, is because we do so many things that are not permit or revenue generating, that it's a good part of our visioning process right now to see what priorities maybe we need to
Triage.
to separate, to focus more on getting those permits that are generating revenue through the process, as well as identifying unpermitted building. That's not just for revenue generation, that's actually for making sure that the community knows that we value verifying the health and safety of work that's taking place in the county to make sure that our people are going to be safe. So, but anyway, I digress. I will be happy to present you with a detailed list.
And I think it goes without saying also where the grants covered the work.
Sure.
Too. Whether it's, yeah, thank you.
Anything else from the board? Anything else to close with? Are we good?
No, thank you. We appreciate your input.
Could we make sure that the direction is clearly understood from both admin and CDD? I just want to make sure we don't walk away thinking it was clear, that it truly is clear. And I'd love to hear it from staff as to what direction they believe they've received.
I can start with what we have so far is the board is requesting an additional agenda item in mid-January that will be presented to you in a team manner by both admin and community development. It will cover a number of items, particularly showing you the process that we went through to get to the preference of the 3-year loan, but also what a 1-year loan would look like, what necessary changes might have to happen in order to do that and not come back in July with another request for a loan for those reserves. It will also include more detailed work of the day-to-day activities in planning and code, specifically items that are not covered by revenue versus, and also what is covered by grants. Sounds like we have an additional information on county council that is now getting added into that to sort of further clarify the normal budget process that we have had of supporting community development activities, just helping to flesh that out a little bit more. As well as an update on citations to this point, code enforcement notice of violations and citations, and how many of our cases, open cases in the recent past, are self-abated versus what is taking extra work on our time. Also looking to see if there are any chronic cases that are not gathering violations and citations and fees and fines at that time. I think that's what I've got. Anything I've missed?
Supervisor Pyska?
Do you have time to add in the fee analysis, at least a high level, to see if we're
We can
hitting the mark or not?
Start with that. We were hoping to have a year of OpenGov capturing the cost recovery time in actuality to report that, but we'll give you what we got. Sure.
Okay.
And just for clarification, not just a team presentation, but a team approach to looking at the options and bringing back that as a presentation.
Thank you. I considered that implied, but I appreciate the clarity.
I thought it was implied last time too, so I thought I'd clarify.
Lloyd, did you have anything that looked like? Okay. All right. With that, I think you have a direction which has been stated. Thank you again for this discussion.